I've been asked how many men over 60 are even willing to talk about what I'm going to tell you tonight. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story about protecting family has reached, because I believe there are more of us out there than anyone realizes. Quiet men, patient men, men who spent a lifetime keeping their anger on a tight leash, and then one day something happened that made them let it go. My name is Walter. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 22 years in the United States Army before the Army was done with me. 2 deployments, 1 bad knee, and a hearing aid in my left ear. My twin brother Raymond spent those same 22 years teaching 5th grade in a little town called Millhaven, Georgia, coaching youth baseball on weekends, and raising a daughter on his own after his wife passed from cancer in 2009. Raymond and I are identical in every way that nature can arrange. Same jaw, same hairline, going gray at the temples, same scar above the left eyebrow from the time we fell off a fence when we were 9 years old. The difference between us has always been this. I came back from 2 wars carrying something hard inside me, and Raymond came back from grief carrying something soft. He was the gentle one, the patient one, the one who believed, even after everything, that most people were fundamentally decent. He was wrong about that, and it almost killed him. I got the call on a Thursday morning in October. It was Diane, Raymond's daughter, and she was whispering. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. Diane had never been a woman who whispered. She was 31 years old and had her father's laugh and her mother's stubbornness, and she'd always been loud and certain about everything. But on the phone that morning, her voice was barely there. "Uncle Walter," she said. "Daddy's in the hospital. He had a fall." I was in my truck and on the highway before she finished the sentence. Millhaven Regional was 40 minutes from my house. I pushed it to 30. The nurse at the front desk told me Raymond Miller was in room 214, and she said it in the careful voice that nurses use when the situation is worse than the paperwork suggests. I took the stairs. My brother was lying in a bed by the window, and when I saw him, I had to put my hand on the door frame to steady myself. His left eye was swollen completely shut, the color of a bruise that had been building for longer than one incident could explain. There were 2 cracked ribs, the doctor told me later when I cornered him in the hallway. His right hand was wrapped, 2 fingers taped together. Someone had beaten my brother. Someone had beaten him badly, and systematically, and more than once. He opened his good eye when he heard me come in, and he smiled. That was the part that nearly undid me. He smiled like he was apologizing for the inconvenience. "Walt," he said. I pulled up the chair beside him and sat down, and I took a long breath because I could feel the old thing waking up in my chest, the thing I'd spent 22 years learning to discipline. "Tell me what happened," I said. He told me. It took a while because he kept stopping to make excuses for people who didn't deserve them. The short version was this. Marcus Webb, Diane's husband of 4 years, had been drinking heavily for most of those 4 years, and what started as shouting had moved to shoving, and what started as shoving had moved to hitting, and what moved to hitting had moved, in the past 8 months, to something that required 2 cracked ribs and a hospital stay to document. Raymond had moved in 6 months ago when Diane asked him to. She hadn't said why exactly, but he'd understood. He'd been trying to be a buffer between Marcus and the rest of the household. Marcus had begun to resent him for it. 2 nights ago he came home and he'd been at the casino, Raymond said. He lost money. He came in loud and I was in the kitchen with Sophie, and I told him to keep his voice down because she was already in bed late as it was. He didn't like that. Where was Diane? Working. She works nights now at the distribution center. Marcus doesn't like that either. I looked at my brother's hand. This isn't the first time. He was quiet. Raymond. No, he said quietly. It's not the first time. I stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot below was ordinary and calm. The kind of ordinary calm that has no idea what's happening 2 floors above it. Sophie was 5 years old. Diane's daughter, Raymond's granddaughter, the little girl I'd only met a handful of times because the drive was long and I'd told myself I was busy. I thought about that. I thought about all the times I'd been busy. What does Marcus look like? I asked. Raymond knew my voice well enough to hear what was underneath the question. Walt, don't. I'm not going to do anything. I turned around. I'm asking what he looks like. He's a big man, 6 feet, maybe 220. He was built once. He's gone soft. Raymond looked at me steadily with his one good eye. He's not going to expect you. I sat back down. Here's what I'm thinking. He listened. When I was done, He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The nurses know my face. The day staff does. Night shift changes at 7. What about Diane? You're going to call her and tell her you signed yourself out. That you're feeling better. That you want to come home. She'll worry. She'll be relieved," I said. "She'll be relieved because she's been terrified. And she's been terrified alone for a long time. And the sound of your voice telling her you're coming home is going to matter more to her right now than the details." I leaned forward. "Raymond, look at me." He looked at me. "You stayed in that house to protect her. I know that. But you can't protect anyone from a hospital bed. Let me go." He closed his good eye. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he said, "He has a brother, Derek. He comes around on weekends. And his mother lives in the house. She has the back bedroom. Tell me about the mother, Connie Webb. She's not a soft woman. She covers for Marcus, makes excuses. When Diane showed her a bruise once, Connie told her she must have done something to deserve it." Raymond's voice was flat when he said it. "She's not innocent in any of this." "And the brother?" "Derek does what his mother tells him. He's not smart, but he's loyal to Marcus the way a dog is loyal to whoever feeds it." I nodded. I was starting to see the shape of things. "All right," I said. "Give me your phone. Give me your wallet. Call Diane." We switched clothes in the hospital bathroom at 6. 48 inches the evening, 13 minutes before the night nursing shift arrived. I'd brought a change of clothes in a bag from my truck. Raymond put on my flannel shirt and my jeans, and I pulled on his gray cardigan and the old work pants that were soft from washing. We stood side by side in the mirror above the sink for just a moment. Same face, same gray temples. The only difference was the bruising on his, and the hardness behind the eyes on mine. "Be careful," he said. "I'm always careful," I said, which was not entirely true. The walk to Raymond's truck in the parking lot took 4 minutes. The drive to 318 Callaway Street took 22. The neighborhood was the kind that had been something once and then been slowly let go, not dangerous, just tired. Lawns that needed work. A porch swing with one chain broken, hanging at an angle. The house at 318 was yellow with brown trim, or it had been yellow once. The porch light was out. I sat in the truck for a moment before I went in. I was running through what Raymond had told me, the layout of the house, the location of the rooms, Marcus's routine. I was also running through what I knew about myself, the same thing I'd had to account for every time I went into a situation in uniform. I carry anger the way some men carry a knife. It's useful. It's also dangerous if you're not careful with it. I got out of the truck. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled like takeout containers and cigarettes and something underneath that. Something that smelled like a household that had been afraid for a long time. The living room television was on, volume loud, casting blue light across a couch where clothes had been piled and left. Dishes on the coffee table. Beer bottles on the kitchen counter. I heard her before I saw her. She was in the hallway, this small voice, barely above a whisper. "Grandpa?" I turned, and there she was. Sophie, 5 years old in a purple nightgown, clutching a stuffed rabbit by one ear, standing at the end of the hallway like she'd been waiting. Her eyes were large and dark, and they were already doing the thing that children's eyes shouldn't have to do, measuring whether it was safe to take a step forward. I crouched down immediately, the way you do when you want to be level with someone. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice low and even. She studied me for a long moment. "You look different," she said. "I've been at the doctor," I said. "They fixed me up a little." She seemed to accept this with the particular pragmatism of children who've learned to accept a lot of things. She walked over and sat down beside me on the floor, close enough that I could feel her warmth, and she showed me the rabbit. Its name, she told me, was Captain. He was missing a button eye. We talked about Captain for a few minutes while I took in the rest of the house around her, cataloging it the way I'd been trained, exits, sight lines, the sound of someone moving in the back of the house. "Is that you, Ray?" A woman's voice from down the hallway. Not Diane's voice, heavier, slower. "Connie?" "Yes," I called back, calibrating Raymond's pitch, which was softer than mine. She appeared in the doorway of the back bedroom a moment later, a heavy-set woman in a housecoat, her gray hair in pin curls. She had small eyes that moved over me like an inventory check. "Thought you were still in the hospital," she said. There was no warmth in it, no relief, no concern, just suspicion. "Feeling better?" I said. Thought I'd come home. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she was looking at Raymond's face. And Raymond's face is my face, and I have spent most of my adult life maintaining an expression that reveals nothing. She went back to her room. Diane came home at 11:30 from her night shift, still in her work jacket, and when she came through the door and saw me on the couch, she stopped and put her hand over her mouth. She'd been crying recently, I could see it. She was thin in a way that her father hadn't mentioned, and she moved carefully, deliberately, the way people move when they've learned that moving the wrong way draws attention. "Dad," she breathed. "You're really here." "I'm really here," I said. She crossed the room and hugged me, and I held her. And over her shoulder, I could see Sophie asleep on the couch cushion beside me, one hand still wrapped around Captain's ear. I waited. Marcus Webb came home at 12:40, and he came home the same way he apparently always came home, like a weather event. The truck in the driveway, the door thrown back, the footsteps that landed just slightly too hard on every surface they touched. I'd been lying on the couch in the front room with my eyes closed, not sleeping, listening to the shape of the house around me. Diane and Sophie were in the back bedroom with the door shut. Connie's television was still on. Derek wasn't there that night. The living room light came on. "Who left these dishes out?" Marcus said loudly, to no one in particular. Then he registered me on the couch. "The hell are you doing here? Thought you were in the hospital." I sat up slowly. I took my time about it. Marcus Webb was approximately what Raymond had described he'd been built once and had gone soft around the middle. But there was still something there, the residue of strength, and he wore it like a credential he expected everyone else to recognize. He was unsteady on his feet, not falling down drunk, but drunk enough that his reaction time was compromised. I'd seen this before. I'd seen it many times. "Feeling better," I said, the same way I'd said it to Connie. "Came home." "Nobody told me you were coming home." He kicked an empty bottle that was on the floor and watched it roll under the coffee table. "This is my house. You don't just show up in my house. It's Diane's name on the lease," I said. He went very still. That's the interesting thing about men like Marcus Webb. They're comfortable with a certain kind of confrontation, the kind where the other person backs down, and they've been doing it so long that when someone doesn't back down, it takes them a moment to recalibrate. I could see him doing it, working out whether he'd heard what he thought he heard. "What did you say to me?" I said it's Diane's name on the lease. I stood up, which means it's her house. Which means when she or Sophie or anyone else in this house asks you to keep your voice down, that's a reasonable request in their own home. He took a step toward me. "Old man, I put you in the hospital once already." "You put my brother in the hospital," I said. "I'm not my brother." He stopped. I watched his face work through it. He was drunk enough to be slow, but not so drunk that the words didn't reach him. He looked at me the way you look at something that's been in your peripheral vision for too long and you're suddenly not sure what it is. "What are you talking about?" "My name is Walter," I said. "Raymond is my identical twin. He's still at Millhaven Regional right now, where he's been since you cracked 2 of his ribs." I held his gaze. "I came here in his place, and I've been waiting for you to come home." He threw the punch the way Raymond had described, wild, telegraphed, the kind of swing that works against people who are afraid of him. I stepped into it rather than back from it, caught his arm at the elbow, and redirected his momentum so he stumbled forward into the wall. Then I put my forearm across the back of his neck and held him there, his face against the drywall, applying enough pressure to make clear that I could apply considerably more. "Here's what you need to understand," I said very quietly, close to his ear. "I am going to step back now, and you are going to sit down, and we are going to have a conversation about what happens next. And if you choose not to do any of that, I want you to understand clearly that the only reason I haven't broken your arm is that I'm trying to do this the right way." I stepped back. He turned around slowly. His face was red, and there was something moving behind his eyes. Not fear exactly. Not yet, but the beginning of the recalculation that fear produces in men who've never had to do it before. He sat down. We talked for 20 minutes. I did most of the talking. By the end of it, he was quieter than I'd ever heard a large, angry man get. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, but is its closest cousin. The kind that comes from having things laid out plainly in front of you and recognizing that you have run out of room to maneuver. He went to his bedroom without another word. The house settled around me. I sat back on the couch and looked at the ceiling and breathed, carefully and deliberately, until the thing in my chest went back to where it lived. 2 days passed. Diane watched me carefully, the way you watch something you don't entirely have a category for. Sophie showed me Captain's injured eye and told me about her teacher at school. I fixed the porch light. I washed the dishes in the sink, which took longer than it should have because there were a great many of them. Connie watched me from doorways and said very little, but I could hear her at night through the thin walls, on the phone, talking in a low, urgent voice that stopped whenever the house made a sound. On the third morning, Derek arrived. He was younger than Marcus by several years, shorter and wider, with the slow, careful manner of someone who processes things at his own pace and resents being rushed. He came in through the back door while I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, and he looked at me the way his mother had looked at me. That same inventory check. "You must be the brother," he said. "That's right." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, which told me he'd been coached on what to say. Men who act on their own don't generally sit down first. "Here's the thing," he said. "Marcus is family. Whatever he's done, he's family. And in this family, we take care of our own." "So does mine," I said. He looked at his hands. He had a particular kind of stubbornness about him, the stubbornness of loyalty that's never been examined. "You need to leave," he said. "You need to take Diane and whoever else you're collecting, and you need to go, and you need to let Marcus be in his own house." "It's not his house," I said, for the second time in 3 days. Derek's jaw tightened. "He won't forget this. You understand that? He won't forget that you came in here and embarrassed him. He should have thought about that before he embarrassed himself." Derek stood up. He stood at the edge of the table for a moment, working something out. Then he went down the hallway to the back bedroom, and I could hear the three of them, Marcus, Derek, Connie, the murmur of a conference that I was not invited to. This had been happening in various forms for 2 days now. They were planning something. I'd known they were planning something. People like this don't adjust. They regroup. I used the time to do 2 things. The first was to call the non-emergency police line and have a conversation with a very patient officer named Hendricks about a hypothetical situation involving documented medical records and a pattern of domestic incidents, and to establish where those records physically were and what process one would follow to present them. The second thing was to move my phone to a position on the kitchen shelf, behind the bread box, angled toward the kitchen table, where it would record video and audio without being visible. I set it up that evening and went to bed early, or appeared to. I'd told Diane to take Sophie to her friend Marissa's house for the night, with a reason that didn't involve the full truth. She'd looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her doing the math. And then she'd nodded and started packing a bag without asking questions. She was her father's daughter in the patience, and her mother's daughter in the instinct. The house was quiet for a long time. I was on the couch, breathing slowly, running through the same calculation I'd run through in a lot of dark and quiet places, what I knew, what I didn't know, what the variables were. Around 11, I heard Connie's television go off. A little after midnight, footsteps, 3 sets of them. They came down the hallway in a loose group I could tell from the sound of the floor, the slightly uneven rhythm that means multiple people trying to be quiet but not quite managing it. They stopped outside the living room doorway. I kept my breathing even and slow. "He's out," Derek said, barely above a whisper. "You sure?" Marcus, lower, slightly hoarse. "Look at him." A pause. "He's out." I heard the sound of something being set on the floor. Something plastic, something that clattered slightly against the hardwood. I kept very still. "If he wakes up, we tell him he was sleepwalking," Connie said. Her voice was different in the dark, more certain of itself. "He fell. Happens to men his age. Confusion, they fall. It's believable." A pause. "Raymond went to the hospital for a fall. Now his brother goes too. The same family. Doctors hear that. They think family history." I had heard enough. I sat up, turned on the lamp beside the couch, and looked at the 3 of them standing in my living room at 12:20 in the morning. Marcus had a length of rubber hose in his right hand. Derek was holding what looked like a cloth, which I didn't have to guess the purpose of. Connie stood slightly behind them both, her arms crossed, and the expression on her face when the light came on was one I recognized from a long time ago in a faraway place. The expression of someone whose plan has just stopped working and who doesn't yet know what to do about it. "Hello?" I said. Nobody moved. I reached behind the bread box and picked up my phone. I turned the screen toward them so they could see the red indicator, and then I set it down on the coffee table, still recording. For the record, I said, addressing the phone as much as them, it is currently 12:22 in the morning. There are 3 people in this room with me. The man holding the rubber hose is Marcus Webb. The man holding the cloth is Derek Webb. The woman who just said the words, "He fell," happens to men his age, is Connie Webb, Marcus's mother. I looked at her. "You want to add anything, Connie?" She had gone a color that the lamp didn't have a good name for. "You came in here," I said, still calm, "at midnight, while you believed I was asleep, with a rubber hose, and what I strongly suspect is a chemical-soaked cloth, having discussed out loud that you intended to make my injury look like an accident. That is assault with a deadly weapon and conspiracy, at minimum, and I have had the camera running for approximately 6 hours, which means the conversation from dinner is also on here, including the part where you said, and I'm quoting, 'The old man needs to learn that this family protects its own.'" Marcus let the hose drop to the floor. The sound of it was very loud. "Here's what happens now," I said. "I'm going to call 911. You are going to sit down and wait. And if any one of you moves toward that door, I want you to remember that I spent 22 years in the United States Army, and I am 64 years old, and there is not a thing wrong with my body, except my left knee and one ear, and I have been in considerably more frightening rooms than this one." I called 911. They sat down. The officer who responded was a woman named Caldwell, young, with the efficient manner of someone who has learned to see a situation clearly and move fast. She watched the video footage on my phone standing in the kitchen while her partner kept an eye on the 3 of them in the living room, and her expression as she watched didn't change much, but I could see her cataloging it. The same inventory I'd done when I walked in here 4 days ago. She called for backup before she was done watching. I gave her the folder I'd put together over the previous 2 days, Raymond's hospital records, Diane's medical files, which Diane had quietly shown me on the second night, photographs I'd taken of the damage to the house, and to a door in the back hallway that had been punched through at a height consistent with a standing adult man's fist. Caldwell looked through the folder and then looked at me. "You put this together in 2 days?" "I had time," I said. Marcus and Derek were handcuffed in the back of separate patrol cars. Connie sat on the porch step, no longer in her housecoat, her pin curls slightly collapsed, looking at the ground. The lights from the patrol cars moved across the neighbor's house, and the neighbor was at his window watching. And I thought about that, how long those lights had been needed here, and how long the neighbors had watched from windows without them coming. I called Diane at 1:15 in the morning. She answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting. "You need to come home," I said. "It's done." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Bring Sophie." The next morning, I drove to Millhaven Regional, and I walked through the lobby and up to room 214, and I knocked on the door, and when Raymond said, "Come in," I came in. He was sitting up in bed, his eye less swollen than it had been, working a crossword puzzle. He looked at me for a moment without speaking, the way you look at someone when you're reading something in their face. "It's done," I said. He put the crossword down. He was quiet for a moment. "Diane? She's home. Sophie's okay. They're both okay. Marcus, charged last night. Connie and Derek too. The DA's office called this morning. Apparently 6 hours of video evidence has a tendency to simplify the conversation." Raymond looked out the window. The parking lot below was the same ordinary calm it had been when I left. "I should have called you sooner," he said. "You should have," I said. "But I also should have been easier to call. I've been telling myself I was far away. I wasn't that far away." I sat down in the chair beside him. "We're going to work on that." He picked the crossword back up, then put it down again. "The house," he said. "Diane can't afford it on her own. She's not going to be on her own. She's going to be with you. And you're going to come and stay near me while you heal, and then we're going to figure out the rest of it together." I looked at him. That's what family does. It just took me too long to remember that. He didn't say anything to that. He's the quiet one, always has been. But he put his hand on my arm for a moment, the way he used to when we were boys, and that was enough. Diane filed for divorce the following week. The attorney she found a woman named Patricia Cross, who had the no-nonsense energy of someone who has won a lot of rooms, told her that the combination of documented medical history and the video footage made the asset division conversation considerably more straightforward than it might otherwise have been. I won't tell you the number we settled on because it isn't my story to tell, but I will tell you that it was enough. It was enough for Diane to move somewhere with good schools, and enough for Sophie to have a room that was just hers, with a door that nobody was going to kick in. Sophie asked me, the day we moved the last of the boxes out of the Callaway Street house, whether Captain could have a new button eye. She held him up and showed me the empty socket, matter of fact about it. Absolutely, I said. We went to a craft store on the way to Raymond's and we found a button that was close enough to match the remaining eye, and Raymond sewed it on that evening at the kitchen table while Sophie supervised him with great seriousness. I watched them from across the room and I thought about all the things that almost hadn't happened, all the moments that could have broken differently, all the versions of that phone call where I'd been too far away or too slow or too wrapped up in the comfortable distance I'd built around myself. I've been asked since then by my brother, by Diane, once by a very earnest young police officer named Caldwell, who called me 2 weeks later for a follow-up, whether I'd do it differently, whether there was a smarter way, a cleaner way, a way that didn't involve me sleeping on a couch for 4 nights waiting for a man with a rubber hose to show up. The honest answer is yes. There are always smarter ways. There are always things you'd adjust if you could run it back. The smarter way was to have been paying attention years earlier, before the ribs, before the swollen eye, before a 5-year-old girl learned to sit in corners and wait for things to stop. The smarter way was to have been the kind of brother who didn't need a middle-of-the-night hospital call to remember that his family was his business. I'm not telling you this story because I want you to go looking for a rubber hose to answer someone with. I'm telling you this story because I know there are men out there who are like my brother, good men, patient men who are absorbing things they shouldn't have to absorb, in houses where the lights don't work and the doors are punched through, and who have told themselves that calling for help would be a burden. And I know there are men like me, men who would drive anywhere in 30 minutes flat if someone would just call them and tell them to come. Call. Pick up the phone and call. Don't wait until the hospital. Don't wait until it's 4 days of couch sleeping and video evidence and patrol car lights at midnight. Pick up the phone and call your brother, your father, your friend, whoever it is in your life who would drive anywhere in 30 minutes. That is not weakness. That is the whole point of having someone. Captain got his new eye. Raymond was out of the hospital by the end of the month. Sophie started kindergarten in a new school district in November, and her teacher told Diane on the second week that she had a remarkable vocabulary for her age and an impressive ability to negotiate classroom disputes. I thought about Raymond coaching youth baseball for 22 years, and I thought, yes, that tracks. I drive to see them every other weekend now. It's an hour and 15 minutes, and my knee complains about the drive on cold mornings, and the hearing aid in my left ear picks up road noise in ways that are mildly irritating. None of that matters. There's a fence out back of Raymond's house that needs a post replaced before winter, and we're going to do that this Saturday. Sophie has informed us that she intends to supervise, and that Captain will also be supervising, and that we should begin at 10 o'clock sharp because she has important afternoon plans involving a movie and a specific type of snack that she will not be disclosing until the time is right. I will be there at 10 o'clock. I will be there at 10 o'clock every time she asks me to, and every time Raymond needs me, and every time Diane calls, no matter what hour it is. That is the only real lesson in any of this. Not about anger, not about strength, not about what a man can or can't do with 22 years of training behind him. Be there. Be the kind of person someone can call. The rest of it takes care of itself.